The bell rang loudly, signaling the start of lunch break at Jefferson Middle School. Hallways filled with students moving in every direction, some chatting happily, others hurrying to find a quiet spot to eat. Among them, a group of 3 known troublemakers walked down the crowded corridor, scanning the sea of students for someone to bother. They were loud, pushing through the crowd, laughing at their own jokes and carrying a sense of entitlement that made everyone uneasy. Their eyes landed on a girl sitting alone at the far end of the cafeteria, carefully reading a book as if nothing else existed around her. The girl was small in stature, with a calm and composed demeanor. Her skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, and her eyes stayed focused on the pages of her book, completely ignoring the noise around her. She seemed peaceful, almost untouchable, and this, ironically, made her an even more appealing target for the bullies. One of them whispered to the others, pointing subtly at her, "That one. Looks easy. Let's have some fun." They exchanged smirks, and with exaggerated confidence they made their way toward her. Students nearby began to notice, whispering among themselves. A few worried friends glanced at her, hoping she wouldn't be hurt, while others watched silently, curious to see what would unfold. The girl, unaware of the attention she was drawing, continued flipping pages in her book, her brow slightly furrowed as she read. She didn't react to their presence, and this silence made the bullies more frustrated. They expected fear, a flinch, or even tears, but she gave them nothing. As they reached her table, one of the bullies leaned over and mockingly asked, "Hey, bookworm, you got a problem or something?" The girl looked up slowly, her eyes meeting his with a calm intensity. She didn't smile or laugh nervously. She didn't try to run. She just stared back, and in that moment a subtle tension filled the air. The bully chuckled, trying to mask his growing irritation. He lightly shoved her backpack with his foot, causing it to fall to the floor with a soft thud. Papers scattered, and the girl immediately bent down to pick them up, keeping her movements deliberate and unhurried. "You don't even care, huh?" he said, leaning closer. She continued gathering her things without speaking, her eyes never leaving his. The other 2 bullies exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to proceed. One of them, trying to assert dominance, reached out and tapped her shoulder. "Hey, answer me. What's your name? Are you scared or something?" She finally spoke, her voice low but steady. There was no hesitation, no trembling. She calmly stood, holding her book close to her chest, and looked at them squarely. "No," she said simply. "I'm not scared." The cafeteria grew quieter as students around them sensed the confrontation escalating. Some held their breath, waiting for the expected meltdown. The main bully, now visibly irritated, leaned closer, his face just inches from hers. "You think you're tough? Just sitting here like that, thinking you're better than us?" The girl's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't back away. Instead, she straightened her posture, showing confidence that only made him angrier. She remained silent for a few seconds, letting the weight of her calmness sink in. Then, in a voice that was firm but controlled, she said, "I'm not better than anyone. I just don't waste my time being mean to people." The words hit harder than the bullies expected. The cafeteria was no longer just background noise. It had become a silent stage for a showdown between confidence and arrogance. The 2 other bullies started shifting uneasily, unsure how to respond. This wasn't the reaction they had anticipated. The main bully's face reddened with frustration. He reached out and shoved her shoulder lightly, thinking it would provoke her into a reaction. But instead of backing down, she stepped to the side, keeping her balance and her composure. "Is that all you've got?" she asked calmly, her tone challenging but not aggressive. Students around them gasped softly, exchanging amazed looks. Nobody had expected her to confront them like this. One of the bullies, trying to save face, stepped forward with a smirk, ready to push her bag again. But the girl was quick. She moved with a sudden precision, catching his wrist gently but firmly, redirecting his energy and causing him to stumble slightly. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Even the main bully took a step back, surprised by how quickly she had turned the situation around. Her actions were controlled, almost instinctive, like she had anticipated this moment long before it happened. A teacher, noticing the commotion from across the cafeteria, started making her way over. But the girl, without losing her composure, gave the bullies a steady look. "You don't need to do this," she said softly. "You can walk away now." Her voice carried authority, and it was clear she meant every word. The bullies, shocked and embarrassed, hesitated. The other students were now watching with wide eyes, realizing that the quiet girl had flipped the power dynamic completely. For a moment, everything seemed frozen. The bullies looked at each other, confused and humiliated. They had expected fear, maybe a few tears, perhaps a struggle, but not this. The girl, calm and collected, stood her ground, holding her book tightly against her chest. Her eyes never wavered and her posture remained strong. The atmosphere in the cafeteria shifted. Where there was once tension, a quiet respect began to emerge from the onlookers. Finally, one of the bullies muttered under his breath and backed away. The main bully glared at her, clearly angry and embarrassed, but he too realized that pressing further would only make him look worse. With a frustrated huff, the three of them retreated to another table, muttering insults under their breath but keeping a careful distance. The girl watched them leave, not a single flicker of fear or anger in her expression. The cafeteria slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Though the whispers about what had just happened didn't stop, her classmates, some of whom had never spoken to her before, started approaching her cautiously, offering compliments or words of encouragement. She smiled politely, acknowledging them without making a big deal out of it. She returned to her book, her calm demeanor restored, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the ripple effect of those 5 minutes would be felt throughout the school for a long time. Students began to realize that appearances could be deceiving, that strength didn't always look the way they expected, and that courage often came quietly but powerfully. As the lunch period ended, and students began filing back to their classrooms, the girl packed her things and walked out with her head held high. She didn't gloat or seek attention. She simply moved forward, leaving a trail of awe and respect behind her. The bullies, meanwhile, were left to rethink their actions, humbled in a way they hadn't anticipated. That day, everyone at Jefferson Middle School learned an unspoken lesson about bravery, dignity, and the unshakable power of composure. After lunch, the atmosphere at Jefferson Middle School was buzzing with talk about what had happened. Students whispered in hallways, repeating the story of how the quiet girl had faced the bullies. Some were amazed, others curious, and a few were envious of her confidence. She walked calmly through the corridors, her backpack slung over one shoulder, hearing the murmurs but paying them little mind. She had never sought attention, and this situation was no different. She simply kept moving, her head held high, knowing she had done the right thing. The 3 bullies, however, were still simmering. They had never been confronted like that before. Their usual tactics of intimidation had failed completely, leaving them frustrated and embarrassed. As they sat in their next class, they whispered among themselves, plotting what to do next. They weren't willing to let it go so easily. One of them muttered, "We can't let her get away with this. We have to do something." The others nodded, but none of them had a clear plan. For the first time, they were unsure how to handle someone who wouldn't react to their usual threats. Meanwhile, the girl returned to her classroom, trying to focus on her studies. Her mind was clear, but she couldn't ignore the occasional glance from classmates who were still amazed by what had happened. Some students smiled at her as she entered, showing admiration without saying a word. Her teacher noticed too, offering a small approving nod. The girl didn't seek praise, but she appreciated the subtle acknowledgement of her courage. After class, the 3 bullies followed her into the hallway, hoping to catch her off guard. They whispered to each other, trying to coordinate a plan, but their nervous energy was obvious. They expected her to be scared or at least annoyed, but she walked confidently, carrying her books and keeping her focus straight ahead. As they closed in, she sensed them approaching. She didn't panic. Instead, she slowed her pace slightly, waiting for them to make the first move. One of the bullies stepped in front of her, blocking her path. He tried to look intimidating, leaning slightly forward. "Hey, we're not done with you yet," he said, his voice a mix of annoyance and uncertainty. The girl stopped, looked up, and smiled faintly, not in mockery but with a calm assurance. "I'm not worried about you," she replied quietly. Her tone was steady and firm, showing she wasn't intimidated by their presence. The bully sneered, but she didn't flinch. "Why are you following me?" she asked, her voice even but sharp. The other 2 bullies tried to step closer, but she didn't move. She stood her ground, letting them know that she wasn't going to back down. Her quiet confidence was unnerving. Students passing by stopped to watch, sensing that something important was happening, and they whispered among themselves. Suddenly, one of the bullies reached for her backpack again, thinking he could provoke a reaction, but she was ready. With a quick, precise movement, she grabbed his wrist and redirected his momentum, causing him to stumble forward slightly. The sudden move startled him, and the other two bullies froze, unsure of what to do. The hallway had gone silent except for the distant noise of lockers and students talking in other areas. A nearby teacher, hearing the commotion, started moving toward them. But before the teacher arrived, the girl took a deep breath and addressed the bullies calmly. "You can walk away now," she said, her eyes steady on theirs. "This doesn't have to continue." Her voice carried a weight that made them pause. The main bully, who had been the most aggressive, took a step back. He wasn't used to being confronted like this. For the first time, he felt unsure of himself. The other two bullies hesitated, their faces showing embarrassment and confusion. They had always relied on fear to get what they wanted, but this girl wasn't afraid. Her calm demeanor, combined with her quick thinking, had shifted the balance of power. The main bully muttered under his breath, clearly frustrated, and finally they decided to retreat, walking away with their heads down, mumbling excuses to themselves. Students who had witnessed the scene exchanged looks of amazement, impressed by how the girl had handled the situation without aggression. After the hallway had cleared, the girl continued to her next class. She felt a sense of quiet relief knowing that the immediate threat had passed, yet she also understood that the bullies might try again, and she needed to remain vigilant. Her mind was sharp, thinking ahead and preparing for any future encounters. She wasn't angry or vengeful. She simply wanted to protect herself and maintain her dignity. Her friends, who had been watching from a distance, approached her cautiously after class. They asked if she was okay, if she needed help, and she reassured them with a calm smile. She explained that she had been careful and that she knew how to handle the situation. Her friends were impressed, some of them even inspired by her courage. They had never seen someone face bullies with such composure and intelligence. Throughout the day, rumors about the encounter spread quickly. Students talked about how the girl had turned the situation around, standing up to the bullies without losing her cool. Teachers discussed the event among themselves, recognizing that the girl had displayed remarkable courage for her age. The bullies, meanwhile, were left to reflect on their behavior. Their usual tactics had failed, and they realized that strength wasn't always physical or loud. They had underestimated someone who didn't conform to their expectations. By the end of the school day, the girl had returned home, still carrying her books, but feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. She knew that her actions had made a difference not just for herself, but also for other students who had witnessed her courage. She reflected on the events, thinking about how quickly fear could be turned into respect when someone acted with confidence and intelligence. Her mind was clear, and she felt ready for whatever challenges might come next. That evening, she spoke briefly with her parents about the day. She explained what had happened in the cafeteria and the hallway, sharing her perspective without exaggeration. Her parents listened carefully, proud of how she had handled the situation. They offered guidance, reminding her that courage and wisdom often went hand in hand. She appreciated their support, but knew that she had acted rightly on her own. As the night went on, the girl thought about the bullies and how they had reacted. She realized that people often judged others based on appearances, expecting weakness where there was strength. Her own confidence had surprised them, and she understood that this was a lesson not only for the bullies but also for her classmates. Bravery could be quiet, strength could be measured in composure, and intelligence could turn fear into admiration. The next morning at school, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Students who had witnessed the previous day's events looked at her differently, with newfound respect. Some who hadn't been present had heard the story and were curious to see the girl who had stood up to the bullies. She walked through the halls as usual, calm and focused, aware of the attention but not seeking it. Her actions had spoken louder than words, and everyone around her had taken notice. The bullies, meanwhile, kept a distance. They whispered to each other, unsure how to proceed. Their confidence was shaken, and they no longer felt in control. They had learned in a brief but powerful encounter that intimidation didn't always work, and that misjudging someone could lead to unexpected consequences. The girl had not sought revenge or confrontation, yet she had won a silent victory that resonated throughout the school. During lunch, the girl found her usual spot and began reading again, her demeanor unchanged. Some students came by to say hello, offer a smile, or share their admiration quietly. She acknowledged them politely, appreciating their support without making a big deal. The bullies watched from a distance, frustrated but cautious, realizing that any attempt to target her again would likely fail. The quiet girl had shifted the social balance with her composure and quick thinking. The day continued with normal classes, but the memory of the confrontation lingered in the minds of students and teachers alike. People had witnessed courage in action, intelligence in motion, and dignity in the face of intimidation. The girl remained humble, focused on her studies and her personal growth, aware that true strength was often silent and measured. By the end of the day, it was clear that she had made a lasting impression, not through aggression, but through resilience, intelligence, and unwavering self-respect. By the third day after the cafeteria incident, Jefferson Middle School was buzzing with quiet tension. The bullies had spent the previous night thinking about what had happened, and they were still unsure how to act around the girl. Their confidence had taken a hit, and the whispers of students talking about her courage added to their discomfort. For the first time, their usual tactics of loud intimidation and mean jokes didn't work, and they were beginning to realize that not every person could be controlled by fear. The girl, meanwhile, continued her normal routine, unfazed by the attention. She arrived at school on time, organized her books, and went to class like any other student. Yet everywhere she went, eyes followed her, some curious, some admiring, and some skeptical. She didn't try to be noticed. She just walked with confidence and carried herself in a way that demanded respect, without demanding attention. During homeroom, she noticed the three bullies sitting together in the back, whispering to one another. They were clearly planning something, and though she didn't let fear show, she paid careful attention. She knew that being prepared was part of staying strong. While she listened and observed, she focused on her work, taking notes carefully and staying engaged in the lesson. She understood that her mind and awareness were just as important as her courage in dealing with difficult situations. At lunchtime, the cafeteria was busier than usual, filled with the chatter of students. She walked to her usual corner, carrying her lunch and her book. Her friends joined her quietly, and together they created a small circle of support. They didn't need to talk much. Their presence alone was comforting. The three bullies sat at a nearby table, glancing in her direction, clearly uncertain about how to act. They whispered to one another, trying to coordinate a plan, but the girl noticed the hesitation in their movements. One of the bullies finally decided to confront her again, attempting to pick a fight without drawing too much attention. He walked toward her table, his steps deliberate, trying to appear confident. But she had already noticed him. She remained seated, calm and composed, and looked up at him as he approached. "Can I help you with something?" she asked in a tone that was neutral but carried authority. The simplicity of her question caught him off guard. He had expected her to flinch or give a nervous answer, but instead she had given him nothing to work with. The bully stammered for a moment, unsure how to respond. The students around them had started paying attention, and the whispers began again. The tension in the air grew, but the girl stayed calm. She adjusted her posture slightly, sitting up straighter, and met his gaze steadily. "You don't need to do this," she added softly. "It won't change anything." Her words were calm, but they carried an unspoken firmness that made it clear she wasn't intimidated. Her calmness was like a mirror, reflecting the bullies' own insecurity back at them. They realized that intimidation alone wasn't enough, and their usual confidence was slipping away. The main bully tried to push her bag again, thinking he could provoke a reaction, but she moved her arm with precision, gently but firmly stopping him. The sudden movement caused him to stumble slightly, and the other two bullies froze. They were learning in real time that she wasn't an easy target. A teacher passing nearby noticed the interaction and began walking toward them. The girl didn't panic or draw attention to herself. She simply continued speaking calmly. "You can walk away now," she said. Her voice was steady and confident, and it carried a weight that the bullies hadn't anticipated. Students in the cafeteria began whispering, amazed by her composure and strength. The main bully looked at his friends, frustration clear on his face. He realized that pushing her further would only make him look worse in front of everyone. He muttered something under his breath and stepped back, signaling the others to follow. They walked away reluctantly, mumbling to themselves, and found a different table. The students watching let out small murmurs of approval, impressed by how the girl had handled the situation without aggression or anger. After lunch, the girl returned to her classroom where she focused on her studies. She felt a sense of quiet pride in knowing she had handled the confrontation well, but she also understood that courage was not about showing off. It was about staying true to herself and acting wisely in difficult situations. Her friends admired her, but she remained humble, understanding that the real victory was in her ability to stay composed and think clearly under pressure. Throughout the day, teachers noticed the shift in the school's atmosphere. Students who had previously been hesitant to stand up for themselves began showing small acts of confidence. The girl's example had inspired others to recognize that courage could be quiet and strength could be subtle. The bullies, on the other hand, were more cautious. They hadn't expected to be humbled, and their previous tactics no longer seemed effective. Their reputation as instigators was being quietly challenged. Later, during a break between classes, the girl noticed a small group of students gathered around a locker, whispering and laughing. She observed from a distance, recognizing the subtle social dynamics at play. She understood that being aware of her surroundings and reading people's intentions was as important as facing direct threats. Her awareness allowed her to navigate the social environment confidently, avoiding unnecessary conflicts while still standing her ground when needed. At the end of the school day, as students packed up to leave, the girl reflected on the events of the past few days. She realized that bravery wasn't always about physical strength or loud words. It was about composure, clarity, and understanding when to act. She had faced bullies without fear, using intelligence and awareness rather than aggression. Her actions had created a ripple effect, inspiring respect from her peers and teaching the bullies a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Walking home, she thought about the future. She knew that challenges might arise again, but she felt prepared to handle them. Her mind was clear, her confidence intact, and her sense of self unshaken. She understood that true strength came from within, and that being true to oneself was the most powerful form of courage. That evening, she shared a quiet moment with her family, discussing the day's events without exaggeration. Her parents were proud, not only because she had stood up to the bullies, but because she had done so with intelligence, restraint, and dignity. They reminded her that life would continue to present challenges, but her ability to face them calmly and wisely would always serve her well. She nodded, appreciating their guidance, yet understanding that she had already learned valuable lessons through her own experiences. The following morning, she returned to school with the same calm determination. Students who had witnessed her courage continued to respect her, and even those who had not been present had heard about her actions. The bullies kept their distance, their previous confidence diminished. The school environment had shifted subtly, with a growing awareness among students that intimidation was not always effective, and that respect could be earned through composure and intelligence. Throughout the day, the girl continued to focus on her studies and interactions with classmates. She remained approachable, friendly, and respectful, showing that strength could coexist with kindness. Her example quietly encouraged others to act with integrity and confidence, creating a small but meaningful change in the school community. By the end of the day, it was clear that her courage and wisdom had left a lasting impression, shaping how students perceived strength, bravery, and respect. The girl had not only defended herself, but had also inspired those around her to recognize the true power of composure and intelligence in the face of adversity. The days following the confrontation passed quietly, but the impact of the girl's courage at Jefferson Middle School was still evident. The cafeteria, once a place where bullies ruled through fear, had subtly changed. Students walked with more confidence, sitting where they wanted and speaking more freely. They had seen that one person, calm and composed, could shift the balance without anger or aggression. The bullies still lingered, but they were noticeably more cautious, uncertain about how to regain control. The girl continued her routine, focusing on her studies and her small circle of friends. She never sought attention, but her peers could not ignore her presence. There was something about her calm confidence that drew people in and made them think twice about underestimating anyone. She walked through hallways, attended classes, and joined group activities just like before, but now with a quiet sense of awareness. She knew that her actions had left a lasting impression, and she carried that with dignity rather than pride. Teachers had noticed the shift as well. They discussed the events in faculty meetings, recognizing that the girl's actions were a valuable example of courage and intelligence. Some teachers took the opportunity to speak to their classes about respect and the importance of handling conflict wisely. Students began to understand that true strength was not about being loud or intimidating, but about staying calm and thinking clearly under pressure. The girl's example had quietly influenced the school culture in a positive way. One afternoon, the girl was walking to her locker when she noticed the three bullies standing in a corner of the hallway. They whispered to one another, clearly unsure how to act. Their eyes flicked toward her, and for a moment she paused, aware of their presence. She didn't show fear, annoyance, or aggression. She simply looked at them calmly and kept walking. Her demeanor alone made them hesitate. They had learned that pushing her further would only make them look foolish and risk drawing unwanted attention from teachers and peers. During lunch that day, students whispered about the quiet girl at her usual table. Some were new to the story and were amazed to hear about how she had handled the bullies. Others, who had witnessed the events firsthand, shared their admiration in hushed tones. Her friends joined her, and they laughed quietly over shared jokes, creating a comfortable and supportive space. Even the bullies, sitting at a nearby table, kept their distance, unsure of how to approach her without drawing attention or embarrassment. As the days passed, the bullies attempted small acts of intimidation, but the girl handled each situation with composure and intelligence. She never retaliated angrily or sought revenge. Instead, she used her awareness and quick thinking to diffuse tension and maintain her dignity. Her actions quietly earned her respect from students who had previously been afraid of standing up for themselves. They began to realize that bravery could be quiet, and strength could be measured in composure rather than aggression. One afternoon, the main bully tried to start a confrontation by blocking her path in the hallway. She looked at him steadily and said calmly, "You don't need to do this. You can walk away." Her voice was firm but not hostile. He hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. For a brief moment, the hallway seemed frozen, with students watching from a distance. The bully finally muttered under his breath and stepped aside, mumbling to his friends. The girl continued walking without looking back, calm and composed, having once again maintained her dignity and control. Over time, her courage began to inspire subtle changes in the school community. Students who had been shy or hesitant started speaking up more in class, standing up for themselves in small ways. Some began helping each other during conflicts, understanding that intimidation wasn't effective and that respect could be earned through composure and intelligence. The bullies, on the other hand, became more cautious and less aggressive, realizing that their usual tactics no longer gave them power. Their social dominance was quietly challenged by one student's calm strength. At home, the girl reflected on her experiences and discussed them with her parents. She didn't embellish the story or seek praise. Instead, she focused on what she had learned about courage, awareness, and resilience. Her parents listened carefully, proud not only of how she had handled the bullies, but also of her maturity in understanding the broader lessons. They reminded her that life would continue to present challenges, but that her ability to face them calmly and wisely would serve her well in the future. In school, the girl continued to focus on her studies, her friends, and her personal growth. She understood that true bravery wasn't about confrontation or aggression. It was about composure, intelligence, and the courage to act wisely under pressure. Her presence alone had quietly reshaped the social dynamics of the school, showing that respect could be earned through self-control and thoughtful action. The bullies, though still present, were more cautious than ever. They no longer acted with the same confidence, realizing that attempting to intimidate her could only backfire. Their behavior slowly changed, and other students began noticing. Even though the bullies remained a part of the school community, their influence had diminished. The girl had shown, through quiet strength and careful action, that power could come from composure, awareness, and intelligence. By the end of the week, the cafeteria and hallways felt different. Students moved with more confidence, and the subtle fear that had once dominated the social environment had lessened. The girl continued to walk calmly through the halls, focused on her studies and interactions with friends, never seeking attention, but quietly commanding respect. Her actions had left a lasting mark, and even those who hadn't witnessed the initial confrontations were aware of her reputation for courage and composure. Her example quietly encouraged others to act with integrity and confidence. Students began helping each other in small ways, supporting peers who were struggling, and speaking up against minor acts of bullying. The school environment shifted slowly but meaningfully, with one student's calm strength serving as a catalyst for positive change. The girl's courage had not only protected herself, but had also inspired others to recognize the power of dignity, intelligence, and awareness in the face of intimidation. Walking home after school, she reflected on how quickly fear could be transformed into respect when someone acted wisely and calmly. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, but her ability to face them with composure and intelligence would always serve her well. She smiled quietly, knowing that she had made a difference, not through aggression or confrontation, but through strength of character and careful action. That evening, she discussed the week with her parents, sharing her reflections and insights. They praised her not only for standing up to the bullies, but also for the way she had handled the situation with maturity and intelligence. She listened, appreciating their guidance, but also understood that she had learned important lessons on her own. Courage, she realized, was often quiet, and strength could be measured in one's composure, awareness, and integrity. By the next day, Jefferson Middle School had subtly transformed. The bullies were less dominant, students were more confident, and the girl continued her routine with quiet assurance. Her example had left a lasting impression, demonstrating that one person's courage and intelligence could influence the entire school community. She had not sought recognition, but respect followed naturally. Her calm strength had shown everyone that dignity and composure could overcome intimidation, and that courage could inspire positive change in even the most challenging environments. The final days of the school week at Jefferson Middle School carried a sense of quiet change. Students walked with more confidence, teachers noticed more cooperation, and the bullies, though still present, had lost much of their usual sway. The girl who had faced them remained the center of an unspoken respect. She continued her routine, focused on learning, reading, and quietly supporting her friends. She never sought attention, but her actions had left a deep mark on the school's culture. During lunch, she sat at her usual spot, surrounded by her friends. They laughed softly over small jokes and shared stories from their classes. The atmosphere was comfortable and supportive, and other students occasionally approached to ask questions or offer compliments in hushed tones. They spoke not out of curiosity alone, but out of genuine admiration for how she had handled the bullies. The girl listened politely, smiled faintly, and returned her attention to her meal or book, never making a big deal out of it. The bullies, meanwhile, sat at a distant table, clearly unsure of how to approach her. Their usual swagger had been replaced with caution. They whispered to one another, occasionally glancing in her direction, their frustration evident. They had learned that intimidation could fail, and that underestimating someone based on appearances was a mistake. Their attempts at control had diminished, and the students around them noticed the shift, slowly realizing that strength was not always about volume or aggression. In the hallways, the girl continued to move with quiet assurance. She acknowledged friends and classmates politely, never boasting or seeking recognition. Her presence alone was enough to inspire confidence in others. Some students who had previously been hesitant to stand up for themselves began acting more boldly in small ways, helping peers or speaking up in class discussions. Her courage had created a ripple effect, teaching others the value of composure, intelligence, and thoughtful action. Teachers took note as well. They saw how her calm strength had influenced the student body, encouraging collaboration and mutual respect. Some teachers incorporated discussions about courage and integrity into their lessons, using the girl's example to show students that bravery came in many forms. The school environment, once tense and dominated by fear, had begun to shift toward one of quiet respect and self-confidence. One afternoon, the main bully approached her in the hallway, clearly attempting to assert some control. He stepped close, trying to look intimidating, but she met his gaze calmly. "You don't need to do this," she said firmly but without anger. Her voice carried authority and clarity, showing she was not intimidated. The bully hesitated, glancing around as students nearby watched. He muttered something under his breath and stepped aside, allowing her to pass. His friends followed, equally cautious. The girl continued walking, unshaken, maintaining her dignity and composure. The week progressed with small moments of interaction that revealed how much respect she had earned. Students asked her for advice or simply shared a kind word, recognizing her calm strength. Even those who hadn't witnessed the initial confrontations were aware of her reputation. She had become a subtle leader, showing that courage and intelligence could influence the school without drama or aggression. At home, she reflected on the past week. She thought about how quickly fear could be turned into respect, how confidence could change social dynamics, and how acting with composure and awareness could inspire others. Her parents listened as she shared her reflections, proud of her maturity and insight. They reminded her that life would continue to bring challenges, but her ability to face them wisely and calmly would always serve her well. The final day of the week arrived, and the girl walked to school with the same quiet determination. The hallways were filled with students moving between classes, but there was a noticeable difference in the atmosphere. The air felt lighter, more respectful, and more confident. She noticed friends and classmates exchanging supportive gestures, small but meaningful. Even the bullies were subdued, acting cautiously and avoiding confrontation. During lunch, she sat with her friends, reading and talking quietly. A few students from other tables approached, asking questions or simply sharing admiration. She acknowledged them politely, listening and responding with calm friendliness. The subtle influence she had had on the school was evident in the way students carried themselves and interacted with one another. Her courage had become a quiet force that encouraged respect and self-confidence in others. The bullies, realizing they had lost the unspoken battle, were noticeably subdued. They no longer tried to assert dominance, understanding that their tactics were ineffective. Their behavior had changed, influenced by the girl's quiet strength and composure. They had learned a valuable lesson about underestimating someone and about the power of dignity and intelligence. The school community, meanwhile, had begun to shift toward a more positive and respectful environment. In her final moments at school for the week, the girl packed her belongings and walked toward the exit. She reflected on the week's events and the lessons she had learned. Courage was not about anger or confrontation. It was about awareness, composure, and intelligent action. Strength could be quiet, and true influence came from understanding oneself and others. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had handled the challenges with dignity and had inspired others along the way. Walking home, she thought about how people judged others too quickly and how appearances could be deceiving. She understood that being true to oneself was the most important measure of strength. Her experiences had shown her that even small actions carried out with intelligence and calmness could make a significant difference. She smiled quietly, proud not of attention or recognition, but of the quiet respect and positive change she had created. That evening, she shared her reflections with her family. She spoke about the week, the bullies, and the lessons she had learned without exaggeration or seeking praise. Her parents listened carefully, proud of her courage, maturity, and insight. They reminded her that life would continue to present challenges, but her ability to face them wisely and calmly would always serve her well. She nodded, understanding that her experiences had already taught her valuable lessons about courage, intelligence, and the importance of dignity. By the following week, Jefferson Middle School had subtly transformed. The hallways, classrooms, and cafeteria were filled with students who carried themselves with confidence and respect. The girl continued her routine, attending classes, reading, and interacting with friends, never seeking attention but quietly commanding respect. Her influence had become part of the school's culture, showing that bravery and intelligence could change social dynamics without aggression or confrontation. The bullies remained part of the school community, but their power had diminished. They had learned a hard lesson about underestimating others and the limits of intimidation. The girl's quiet courage had challenged their authority and inspired a shift in behavior. Students who had been hesitant to act or speak up began to do so, encouraged by her example. The school environment, once dominated by fear, had become more positive and respectful, with the girl's composure and intelligence serving as a guiding influence. As the week ended, the girl reflected on the journey she had taken. She had faced intimidation with calmness, intelligence, and awareness. She had turned fear into respect and inspired others to act with courage and dignity. Her actions had shown that true strength did not require aggression or loudness, but came from understanding oneself, remaining composed, and acting wisely. She felt a sense of quiet accomplishment, knowing that she had made a meaningful difference in her school community without ever seeking recognition or praise. Her story became an unspoken legend among the students. They spoke of her courage and intelligence quietly, in awe of how she had handled the bullies. Teachers noted the change in the school's atmosphere, recognizing the influence of her calm strength on students and staff alike. The bullies, though still present, had learned that intimidation was not always effective, and that respect could not be demanded through fear. The girls' quiet resilience had created lasting change, shaping the school community for the better. The final lesson was clear. True courage comes from within. It is quiet, intelligent, and composed. It inspires respect, shifts social dynamics, and encourages others to act with integrity. The girl had shown that one person's strength, carried with dignity and awareness, could transform an entire environment. Jefferson Middle School would not forget the impact of her courage, and the students who witnessed it would carry the lesson with them long after she had moved on. Understanding that strength is measured not by aggression, but by composure, intelligence, and the ability to act wisely in the face of challenge.